I recently had a chance to visit a classic-style arcade, and man, did it take me back. Thinking about it, I realized I hadn't been in an arcade like this in probably 12 or so years. Everything felt immediately familiar, and my senses made everything come rushing back. Had it really been so long?
This experience got me thinking about a lot of things, and one thing that really stuck with me was that feeling you had every time you'd leave the arcade. Now, if you're old enough to have frequented one, then you know exactly what I mean. You wanted to have that game that you just played at home on your console of choice. In your mind, that game would look, sound, and play exactly like its arcade counterpart.
For many game generations, the idea that you could have that exact arcade-perfect port at home seemed impossible. The consoles just weren't powerful enough, and all the wishing in the world wasn't going to make that Master System version of Afterburner any closer to the arcade.
Thinking back to it now, the thing I find most fascinating about this time was the way the developers would fit these huge arcade games onto this tiny little cartridge. Sometimes the only thing that they would have in common is their name. In these upcoming episodes, I'm going to take a look at some of the more notable arcade to console ports. Hey, it should be fun.
The arcade version of Rygar was released by Tecmo in 1986, well before they had any Ninja Gaidens or Dead or Alives under their belt. It tended to be just one of those games that I'd play at the local theme park the 1 or 2 times I would go during the summer. Nothing more, nothing less. As the story goes, Rygar is some sort of legendary hero who is out to save the fantasy world of Argul. He wields this spike shield that's attached to a chain called the disc armor for a weapon. It's a pretty unique idea, but functionally it's just your typical blunt object used to smack some demons around. Being tethered to a chain gives the player a tiny bit more freedom than we're used to with these kind of things, like being able to swing it in an arch over your head. This gives you some vertical and zoning attacks that come in handy in a pinch. Another nice thing is that via the collection of power-ups, your reach becomes longer and longer. If you last long enough, you'll become a force of nature, and that's a big if. This is your typical quarter muncher, so be prepared to die a lot. I mean, constantly. Each of the 27 rounds adhere to your basic side-scrolling elements. There's no real exploring, though the occasional vertical passages do give a nice sense of progression. You can track your progress through each round with this handy little mini-map in the lower right-hand corner. The graphics are okay. There's some nice parallax scrolling here and there, but you're not really going to have a chance to look closely at anything because you're just constantly being bombarded with enemies from every direction. Each level ends with you gently picking up a statue and moving it aside to allow passage. Thanks for being so careful, Rygar.
I gotta say that I didn't really care for the arcade version of Rygar that much. It was just one of those games that maybe I'd drop a quarter into once in a while if I saw it. On the other hand, I think that my brother liked it a lot more than I did, because it was one of a handful of games that he asked for his birthday when he got his NES.
Tecmo brought Rygar to the NES in 1987, making some changes that would make it a much more interesting game. Tecmo was smart in realizing that home audiences were looking for something a bit longer and more bang for their buck. Rygar and his disc armor are back, but gone was the linearity and just about everything else. The quest in this port was a lot bigger. You can move freely through Argul looking for these awesome-looking meditating guys. Once you discover them, some give you cryptic hints to proceeding, but if you're lucky, some will give you important items like a grappling hook, crossbow, or a pulley that open up new sections of the world. These overhead sections are pretty cool. They spice up the adventure with a little bit of variety. It's very apparent that the development team was interested in crafting something a bit more interesting in this version. If this overall style sounds familiar, that's because it is. We'd recently seen this style in Metroid a year earlier. I actually find it pretty interesting that this game doesn't get much credit for expanding the genre.
Rygar is a fairly tough game. Nintendo hard, if you will. You only start with 3 hit points, so you're going to get smacked around a whole bunch at the beginning. Luckily, with every enemy that you kill, you're an experience, and with that comes higher attack power and more life. You can even collect these little star things that allow you to cast spells.
You get unlimited continues, which is quite handy, if I'd only known about that as a kid. Funny story, it wasn't until revisiting this game for this video that I even discovered you could continue in general. The game kicks you back to the title screen with no visual cues that this was even an option. So I would usually just turn off the game, frustrated. I used to spend hours grinding hit points at the beginning just because I couldn't make it very far with just my playing skill. One time I even stayed home from school with the intent on finally beating it. I grinded hit points all day and made it to the last boss, where I was defeated. This whole unlimited continue thing could have saved me a lot of fear of returning to this game over the years. One noteworthy aspect of this version is just how great the soundtrack is. The arcade's only true decent track was probably the level end jingle, and even that's not that great. But the NES version has some very memorable notes right out of the gate. These aren't just themes, they're anthems.
I think it's fairly obvious just which one is the better game. The arcade version is okay, but there's just nothing really that special about it to me. The NES version, on the other hand, is great. If you haven't played it, you should definitely hunt it down. It's like under $10 on eBay. Definitely worth it.